Let me tell you a tale of two continents. One in the Atlantic, called Atlantis. Another in the Pacific, called Lemuria, or Mu, MU for short. 25,000 years ago, these two continents were battling each other on the ideology of the day. Look at them as the two largest children on the block and the two highest civilizations. At that time, they both had two different ideas about which direction civilization should go. The Lemurians felt that the other, less evolved cultures should be left alone to continue on their own evolution scale. The Atlanteans believed that all the less evolved cultures should be brought under sway by the two evolved ones. This caused a series of wars between Atlantis and Lemuria. In these series of wars, thermonuclear devices were used. And when the wars were over and the dust cleared, in reality, there was no winner. The outback in Australia, the Mojave Desert, parts of the Gobi Desert, and the Sahara are all remains to remind man of the futility of this type of war. During the wars themselves, people, highly civilized, stooped to quite low levels. But they too, at the end, they realized the futility of such behavior. Lemuria and Atlantis itself became the victims of their own aggressions. Both the Lemurian homeland and the Atlantean homeland had been weakened by the wars. Thus, they knew that in about 15,000 years, both of their continents were going to sink completely. The Atlanteans had their second set of cataclysms, which reduced Atlantis from a large continent to a series of islands. Lemuria, in essence, did somewhat of the same. However, you might say, well, why would the people be upset at that time for something that was going to happen 15,000 years in the future? In those days, people lived for 20, 30,000 years commonly. They understood many of those who caused the havoc would see the end of the destruction. When Lemuria, which went down first, almost 200 years before Atlantis sunk, they petitioned the Agartha network. The Agartha network is a network of subterranean cities that is guided by a city called Shambhala the Lesser, to distinguish it from Shambhala the Greater, which is the etheric Shambhala over the Gobi Desert. Shambhala the Lesser was created when the continent of Hyperborea was vacated after Earth lost her mantle and the planet started receiving radioactive waves that they had not been victim to in the earlier times. So they started building subterranean cities over 100,000 years ago. When Atlantis and Lemuria petitioned to build subterranean cities themselves and to be accepted into the Agarthian network, they had to prove to Shambhala the Lesser that they had learned the lessons of aggression, that they had learned the lessons of war. And they also had to prove it to many other agencies, such as the Confederation, which we will go into a little later, because Atlantis and Lemuria had both been members of the Confederation. And when they started their warlike efforts against each other, they were expelled temporarily from the Confederation and had to prove that they had also learned the lessons of peace to be allowed to be members of the Confederation again, to be accepted into it. And Shasta, which is where the Lemurians chose to build their city. California was part of the colonies, part of the area of the Lemurian lands. And they understood that Mount Shasta and those areas of California would survive the cataclysms. Mount Shasta already being a place of great sacredness on this planet. They chose to reroute the lava tunnels from Shasta itself so that the volcano would not erupt again. And there was already a very large domed cavern within it. And they decided to build upon that. And they constructed the city that we now call Telos. Telos was the name of the whole area of much of what is now the Southwest and much of what is now California was originally called Telos, which meant communication with spirit, oneness with spirit, understanding with spirit. It was constructed to hold a maximum of 2 million people. When the cataclysms started, only 25,000 people were saved. Many had been brought to Telos before the cataclysm started. But when the second set started in Lemuria, the volcanoes started erupting so fast and sent so much debris into the air that where they had intended to try and save at least 1 million people from the Lemurian mainlands, they were only able to save 25,000. Thus, that was what was left of the Lemurian culture, the Lemurian mainland. Already the records have been brought from Lemuria to Telos. Already the temples had been built in Telos. While Lemuria, or what was left of Lemuria, mainly Telos, was coping with the aftermath of the destruction of their continent, the earthquakes continued. During these earthquakes, the earth shook so hard that in many, many places they went right off of what you would now call the Richter scale. When a continent sinks, the whole planet reacts. Earthquakes that reach the equivalent of what you would call a 15-point. These earthquakes were so intense that many people died from the sound of the earthquake, not from any effect of the quake itself, such as a building falling upon them or something, but a quake of that high of intensity created a screech through the atmosphere that killed many people simply from the sound of it.